It took 8 episodes, but we finally got the big action blowout, and holy fuck, was that one hell of a fight. 6 straight minutes of non-stop action, delivering the highest quality animation a single episode of a Dragon Ball TV series has seen until this point. If the episode brought you back to the heights of DBS Broly, then you would be 100% right, because this marks the return of one of its major players. Characters flying through mountains, major use of the environment, a huge emphasis on speed. Whether you realize it or not, you've seen this approach in Dragon Ball before, and that is all thanks to the director of today's episode, Kazuya Karasa, returning after episode 2 but now with his own storyboard in hand rather than Yoshima's. All throughout Dragon Ball Super, Karasa would be given some of the most low priority episodes, typically paired up with Yoshima's solo animation, but it would be his strength in storyboarding that elevated those episodes to new heights, especially in combination with the action guests. When he was finally given a major episode, the gloves came off and he dropped one of the most fast-paced battles of the series. It was no surprise then that, as I mentioned last time, he jumped into action boarding duties on DBS Broly and directed the fan-favorite Vegeta portion of the fight. It shows off his traits as a director really well. He loves sweeping backgrounds, destroying the environment, and really making full use of the space to the best of his abilities. Even heading into non-Dragon Ball properties like Dragon Quest, his approach never changed, and I think as we look across the action of this episode, you'll see that exact same thing here. The sweeping camera is back, Goku runs all over the environment, the scale of this fight feels huge, especially with the ground exploding into towering mountains for the combatants to engage with. It helps the fight feel extremely organic and grounded in the space that it's in, and even putting aside the environment, he really makes full use of just how different this fight feels from typical Dragon Ball action. The sheer size difference between the two, the use of a giant hammer, I love the way he boards Goku's manic movement to overcome that difference. Like his size gives him a speed advantage that makes him really hard to hit, and of course ensuring the Nioibo remains front and center for most of the fight is really just the icing on the cake. Condensing the battle into a very brief 6 minutes might not necessarily allow for the greatest of tensions and meaningful battle narratives to be built, but man does it make for the most visually exhilarating battle yet. This episode kicks off with what looks like Yohei Sasaki's work, the Gintama star. Last seen on episode 4, he made a very strong debut with his super snappy timing and sketchy line work, chock full of thick brushwork that really emphasizes the depth of the image. This scene here is Sasaki on crack. The looming presence of the Tamagami, the crazy snappy dodging and easing of the speed as the flow ramps up and down. I love the way the effects work kind of spirals upwards with each impact too. And man, if there's one thing that so stood out to me about his work is that he is incredible at drawing dynamic poses. Powerful, gestural drawings are so pivotal to creating smooth flowing work, and he really has such a knack for them. Like, check out this insane Thor moment with the Tamagami retrieving the hammer. The way Goku floats up and slightly dangles his legs is amazing, and that extends right through to the rest of the cut where he animates a really similar thing for Goku's swipe with the Nioibo. That little leg twirl adds so much weight to the scene. There's such a cool example of how well flowing this fight is in the next cut, where the Tamagami spins Goku, only for the camera to pull out, revealing the floor is hand-drawn, which allows for it to then rotate inwards again as Goku drops through the Guardian's legs. Every movement just so seamlessly connects to the next cut. I absolutely cannot praise this board enough, and especially the animators for delivering it to its fullest potential. Sasaki came onto this series as a total unknown for Dragon Ball fans, and even on Gintama, its limited production economy never really allowed him to do that much. To see him come alive on DAIMA is such a blessing, and I think he might just be my favorite animator on this show so far. Unshackled now, this was easily my favorite piece of animation on the episode. It wasn't even close. Frustratingly, Sasaki and Manabe actually have really similar traits, and so attempting to work out where the pair's scenes begin and end has been really hard. I do feel like the Super Saiyan transformation is almost definitely from Manabe. The shape of the effects work and the spin and the dodge feel very him to me timing-wise, and it sure does stand in direct contrast to who comes just before this. That is, of course, Yuichi Karasawa. That man has got to be one of the easiest animators to spot. His scene here is virtually identical to his work on Broly, right down to the rotating floor and weird robotic timing. It's like the director Karasawa said, "Hey, Animator Karasa, do that Broly thing again, and so that's what he did. It's so funny to look back at his work across Super and see that strange, stilted movement. It's so mechanical, which you think will be perfect for a design like the Tamagami, except it gets applied to Goku here, which is really kind of ironic. I know a lot of people look at his work and call it kind of janky, which I totally get. It is. I mean, Goku turns on the spot here and ends up on the other side of the arena, but I just have a weird soft spot for it anyway. Maybe I'm just nostalgic for DBS jank. Okay, maybe not, but the bottom line is Karasawa's scene was still really cool in spite of that. Next up to the plate is Ken Otsuka animating what is probably my second favorite scene in the episode after Sasaki's. This is easily Otsuka's best work on the franchise. It is balls to the wall fucking crazy. Whenever he's shown up on Dragon Ball in the past, it's always been fine, but never quite living up to the name that he made for himself back in the heyday. His last scene was really cool, but oh my god, is this on a totally different level. There is insane posing up front, extremely complex background animation. I mean, this guy is drawing grass and buildings for God's sake. He completely redeems himself for the slightly awkward rotation the other week, doing the same thing here but 100 times better. I love the Tamagami deflecting the blasts and the way the timing uses holds to then unleash with immense speed. Oh my god, it just ramps up and down so perfectly. But man, Goku running along the buildings before it pulls out for this insane long shot with the coolest explosions is just masterful all around. I cannot emphasize just how much I adore how the environment was used and manipulated in this episode. It made this fight feel massive and allowed what initially looked like a flat wasteland to turn into something genuinely interesting. But man, who else outside of this already all-star lineup can take this concept and push it to the max?
Now Toshi, oh you're too good! Yo, now Toshi! Now Toshi looking extra clean!
Yes, it is now Toshi Shida making his DAIMA debut with a solid 2 minutes of insane action. Goku manifesting atop this huge pile of rubble brings me right back to Goku vs Kid Buu, but man is it so much cooler in Shida's hands. The wibbly wobbly camera work that just doesn't stop zooming in and out is such a staple of his work. You know what you're getting with a Shida scene, and as much as I could call it formulaic, it is just so cool every single time. I have to give a massive shout out to the direction in this scene especially. The red-blue color work is such a simple bit of symbolism, but it's so effective, and I really loved it in the big long shot. The Kamehameha is conveyed as this huge, overwhelming beacon that completely drowns out the rest of the environment's color. It's like a massive firework went off and doused the world in blue. I mean, god, the way that it just zooms across the environment is like a fucking Godzilla beam. It makes it feel so dangerous and in ways that I don't think we've seen in Dragon Ball before. Shida really is just a force unto himself. I could sit here forever and sing the praises of his wholly unique effect shapes, his fantastic art throughout, and his ability to deliver layouts that are just so precise in their execution. He might feel stale to some, and he might not be the only go-to for major action set pieces at Toei anymore, but man does he still pack a punch. What a fantastic way to end this astonishing battle. This episode is such a powerhouse. That was only the first 6 minutes, while the rest of the episode is of course not a series of action scenes. Karasawa's direction should as not make it any less interesting. There's a real strong, rising tension to the mind game that follows, and it nicely shows off the animation director Kozue Komatsu's style, along with some fantastic Nakatsu corrections as always. Komatsu almost feels like a halfway house between Shintani and Tsuji, so much so that in some of the later scenes I was genuinely shocked to find out that Tsuji wasn't even on this episode. I think that might just straight up explain why the two were paired together back in episode 3. They draw very similar ear shapes and have quite round features, but where Tsuji is a little more Yamamuro-esque due to her time on Super, Komatsu feels a little bit more like Nakatsuru. I notice she quite consistently does these deep third tone ear shadows especially, which really does help to make her stand out next to Tsuji. I'll definitely have to dive back into episode 3 and see if I can spot her now that I can more clearly see the difference between the two. The back half of this episode though is just pure background porn. I've spoken so much about how wonderful the art direction is in this show, but this really feels like the most interesting it's been so far. Arensu's lair has got to be my absolute favorite of the environments showcased in DAIMA at this point. I've so desperately wanted this show to deliver on its promise of a Dragon Ball RPG adventure, and what better way to do that than to deliver a witch's lair doused in beautiful colors with even a sinister lab thrown in for good measure. The lighting throughout this section is so strong, and I think it all comes to a head with the conversation over the cauldron. This is animated by Isamu Takara, someone who you will have seen previously on the opening of this show, but who also served as a co-character designer on the Broly movie. His wispy effects are great, and so who better than to deliver on the wonderful concept of the various Buu forms manifesting in the cauldron's smoke. That's such a cool idea, and the rising tension in this scene is so strong. What a fantastic way to ramp up the stakes heading into the second part of the show. This episode just had everything going for it. Even the comedy in the last few minutes of the episode had me crying with laughter. It's also perfectly timed, so perfectly drawn. What more can you ask for? I'm just so beyond overjoyed to see the results of the show's astonishing schedule on display here. I've of course spoken time and time again about the level of polish and high average quality found on DAIMA, but to see its first real major episode look like this, one that is really just scratching the surface of the show's stakes, is amazing. The show has continued to deliver extraordinary movement week after week, even when other areas were lacking. I will keep saying it until the cows come home, but this is everything Dragon Ball should be, deserves to be, and I cannot wait to see what comes next. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having just as much fun with DAIMA as I am, and as always, be sure to drop a like if you enjoyed this, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you next time.